Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birkin Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birkin. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Charity Therapy. Today, I am joined by Inti Martínez-Alemán. Inti is my friend and also a third-generation lawyer. What's always a trip to me is that he was already certified as an attorney in Honduras. Then he immigrated to the U.S. and went to law school all over again to become licensed here. That is dedication to the law, friends. That is dedication. Inti's practice is through his firm, Ceiba Fôrte Law Firm, in both Minnesota and New York. He's big time. Thanks for being here, Inti.
Hey, thanks, Jess. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it. I wanted to have you on the podcast because I've been getting a ton of questions about reopening during, the sort of like post-pandemic phase that we're going through. And what do all these groups need to do to be protected? And so I thought you'd be a good guest to chat about that with me because of your business law background. But first, Inti, a little bird told me that you have this really interesting technique to help new clients that come see you explain their case to you. And it involves choosing a photo. So with that, can you tell us what this thing is that you do?
Yeah, for sure. I have several trinkets or gadgets that I use, and the common theme for all of them, Jess, is to alleviate stress and anxiety from clients or potential clients who come through the door. Most people don't hang out with lawyers on a frequent basis, for better or for worse.
Right.
And so what this technique is, a bunch of cards, maybe 50, 60 cards, images of all kinds, ocean, sailboats, apples, railroad crossing, families holding hands, a boat, the beach, etc. So day-to-day images. So I asked them, please choose one card of this set that reflects how your case impacts your life today. And they're like, what the heck? So they go through the set of cards, and most choose one. They follow instructions. Others are like, oh my gosh, I couldn't choose just one. And then they just throw these cards at me and say, case means this to me or this image reflects that. I look forward to going on a boat with my family. I just have a new grandkid. And it's only like 30, 60 seconds. And we're not even talking about the case yet, but that helps me understand several things like their mindset and helps also to humanize the conversation. And it also removes the edge from them. They're ready to talk about their legal case, how it affects their life. So if you humanize it, it helps things flow.
Okay, I love that so much. And I'm even thinking there's like a lesson in there for my nonprofit folks. Like, just you could do that with donors, Get them to tell the story of what the nonprofit mission means to you or how you got involved. I mean, holy buckets, what a way to like just break the ice and like get over the initial nerves of talking with someone about your situation.
And I learned this actually from a nonprofit, Eagle Brook Church. And I was a Bible study leader there.
That's so great.
And now I use it in my law practice. I have other ones like a little chart telling them what we're going to do in our consult. And it explains, like a path or trajectory and so on.
Yeah, I'm always like, here's my 8th grade illustration of what a nonprofit looks like, Totally. Gotta do it.
They love it.
Gotta do it. All right. That's awesome. Let's get into our questions for you today. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Here's our first questioner. I'm the executive director of a small cultural organization, and we are gearing up to reopen our in-person after-school programs. Of course, we've been doing it virtually for the past year. We're going to take all reasonable precautions to make sure no one gets sick, but do we need to do anything in particular to make sure we're covered legally?
Yeah, so I love giving legal advice in a confidential setting. So this is not one of them. So
don't worry, there's disclaimers on the podcast, Inti. None of this is specific legal advice.
Correct. So thank you for that question. Another proviso is that there's no way on earth that you can be fully covered, legally speaking. You can ask people to sign all the waivers you want, and they can still sue you.
And that's a nice piece of paper. You should do that, but...
But they can still sue you. Will they win? Maybe not. Maybe yes. We don't know. That's for the courts to decide. But there are better ways to mitigate damages or reduce that liability. And there are worse ways to do that. So in this, general scenario, that's good that you're taking those reasonable precautions and nobody gets sick. Legally covered, I would say maybe a waiver would be the ideal document. Could be as short or as long as you want it. I mean, there's always a sweet spot depending on what exactly were you trying to protect, who the people involved are, what the risks are, different settings. It's a small culture organization, after school program, can be a wide array of things.
Right. There's stuff we don't know in this question too, like how old are your participants? I mean, if they're under 12, we've got non-vaccinated people.
Is it indoor?
I'm assuming
is it outdoor?
they're minors. Yeah. Are they indoor, outdoor? There's a lot of stuff we don't know. So we're going to...
Are there disabilities involved? Are there religious, observations involved? And so on and so forth. So, but yes, a legal waiver would be amazing. Sometimes people are not too happy about signing waivers. So maybe a disclaimer, a notice, sending a notice to all the participants. That might not be as amazing as a sign waiver, but at least you did your due diligence on that.
Yeah. And so the difference there being like, I acknowledge there is risk for my child participating in this program. That's a disclaimer. Like, hey, when you sign up, like there's some risk to you, versus a waiver being like, I agree not to sue you no matter how bad it is, unless you intentionally do something horrible to my child. I'll give up all my legal rights.
Correct.
Right on. Yeah, I think the other thing here that I've noticed with clients is like, just follow the guidelines. Like, what is reasonable precautions? Well, it's probably whatever the state or the CDC is recommending. So just keep tabs on those, because I feel like those are changing over time, right?
Yeah. And document everything.
Yeah. As long as you're following those, what else can you do?
Yeah. Document everything. Be consistent. Because it's like, for your buddies, you have a set of rules, and your non-buddies, another set of rules. That's not cool.
Right. Oh, but I know this kid, and this kid lives on my block, and they come over all the time, so we don't have to follow the protocol. No.
You got it.
Okay. That's awesome. Let's jump right to the next one. Our trade association wants to host an annual conference, which brings in people from all over the country. Some folks on the board think we should ask registrants for this conference if they're vaccinated against COVID-19. Others say this violates HIPAA. Who does HIPAA apply to? And can we ask conference attendees if they're vaccinated? Okay, I love this question. This is a good one.
Yeah, and I love it too on so many levels, specifically on the spelling of HIPAA, because people misspell it all the time. Some spell it like a female hippo, and that's not how it goes. It's more like HIPAA. But there's so many variations out there in the Twitterverse and so on.
Well, it's also like they don't know what that is. They're just, They heard that that's the medical privacy law. And so it's like, doesn't this apply to us?
Right. So easy to say, I won't reveal that because it's a HIPAA violation or whatever. You can't ask that because it violates HIPAA. No. To answer your question, Jess, yes. Who does HIPAA apply to? It applies to what they call covered entities. And usually it's like hospitals, clinics, physicians, and dentists, and so on and so forth.
Medical providers, typically.
Medical providers generally, and also their business associates and business entities. For example, a medical billing company. They don't treat you medically, but they have certain medical information, personal medical information that they should protect. So it applies to them. And their subcontractors as well. Yeah. So HIPAA protects information, doesn't protect people. Yeah. And it doesn't apply in all settings and every setting. People think it's like, HIPAA's magical, covers the world.
Right.
No,
that's not true. I think I'm reading between the lines here because they say trade association. Now, that could be a trade association that's somehow medically oriented or has medical information. But my guess is this is like, the state association of somebody,
Correct.
whatever. And it's just random. And they're not a covered entity under the law. And my gut feeling is that this board is just having a little bit of drama about their conference.
Correct. Too much drama, a little bit of QAnon influence. It happens. So who does HIPAA apply? It will be those entities that we talked. Can the conference attendees be asked if they're vaccinated? So that's a funny question because yes, the answer, you can ask if they're vaccinated, but are they required to give you an answer? That's a completely different answer, you know?
Or do you really want to ask that question?
Like, do you want to ask?
I assume your community members are coming to this. Your voting members for your trade association nonprofit. That's probably a voting member group, and these are where you get your money. This is people pay their member dues and they pay their conference registration fees, and then you're going to be like, "Hey, y'all, everybody, tell me if you're vaccinated or not," even though I have no right to really ask you this question.
Yeah.
That can be tough. I'm picturing the boardroom when they're discussing this, and my experience is saying is somebody thinks very strongly we should make a vaccination policy about the conference, and somebody else is trying to rely on HIPAA because they're like, no, that's not a good idea, and we shouldn't do that. But maybe they're being indirect, and they don't want to come right out and say like we shouldn't do that.
I mean, it's good that they're thinking about protecting their attendees and whatnot.
Yes.
But
So it seems like the answer is yes, you can ask them, but your attendees have no obligation to answer you.
And if they answer, let's say they say yes, so far you're good. It gets trickier if there's follow-up questions as to, let's say the answer is no. The follow-up question is, why not? And then that's a mess. Can of worms. You don't want to get into that.
Oh, that's a great point. You could ask them, and if they say no, then what? You deny them entrance to the conference? Or you just collected a data point for no good reason? Yeah.
So reasonable accommodations come into play here, right? And let's say if it's a disability reason for saying no to vaccination or religious observance. So you must provide them a reasonable accommodation, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think this just opens up a whole can of worms that this trade association doesn't necessarily need to weigh into. For me, I'm like, hey, if people are really worried about it, maybe you should just have like a mask policy at your event. And don't worry about whether people are vaccinated or not. It's kind of none of your business. They don't have to answer you. You don't want to have to get into the whole accommodations discussion.
It could also be an optional question, like part of registration, your address, name, whatever. Optional, vaccinated, yes or no, fully vaccinated, yes or no. Yeah. And then, it's a good data point to say 70% of registrants said that they were vaccinated. So it might give comfort to future registrants of joining in.
Yeah.
Or last minute registrants joining in.
Well, or you could see how like an association might just want to poll their community. Like,
that's right.
How are our people doing in our profession? Like, 87% of like plumbing contractors are vaccinated or whatever the data point is. I don't know that that's where they're going with this one, but I think that would also be an okay thing to do. It's totally voluntary. You're just polling your community, just gathering some information, just as you would any other survey question.
Yeah, and I also see this as a type of statement, maybe. Often organizations want to make a statement saying, we're asking these questions. We care about vaccination. Right. They don't really care about the data, but it's like, we stand for these. We're on this side of the aisle.
Where we're sitting in Minnesota, this would be a very passive-aggressive, on-brand way to make the statement, too.
There you go.
All right, let's move on to our third question. My small nonprofit is planning to open our office where about 15 employees will work in person. We did a poll of everyone. Oh, there you go. And literally everyone has reported that they intend to get a COVID vaccine. Can we mandate that all employees, current and future, be vaccinated against COVID-19? We want to protect our employees and make sure people feel comfortable coming back to work. I love this question. I've gotten so many questions about this.
It's so multi-layered, Jess. So let's unpack it a little. Mandate all employees to be vaccinated. And we're going to talk about current and future in a minute. But mandate, how about we use a require or condition? You may come back to the office only if you have a COVID-19 or you're fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Yes, the answer is yes. You can condition returning to the office. Can you condition being employed, which is different than returning to the office? Also, yes, but you have to, again, it goes back to being consistent, having clear policies, and current and future matters, especially if applicants are being treated one way, but current employees are not. And so having that consistency is critical. However, if an employee voluntarily discloses a disability for saying no to a vaccine or a religious belief for saying no to a vaccine, then you have to provide reasonable accommodation for that. And you could get in hot water if you don't.
Yeah, I'm getting so many questions about this from clients. And it's like what I'm seeing in this particular question is everybody's singing Kumbaya and holding hands right now. Mm-hmm. We're all on the same page. Mm-hmm. And you absolutely, if you want this to be your policy, you need to set the policy. Yes. You can't just count on everybody is all in agreement right now, because if you hire someone new and they're not on the same page as you, all of a sudden you don't have a policy on point.
That's right.
And now you're going to penalize this person when nobody's established that this was the rule. It just so happened that everybody was in agreement, which is great and lovely. But the consistency is so big. And just actually having a written policy, so many nonprofits don't write stuff down.
Oh, agreed. And in the business world where I come from, same thing. What I tell them, if you don't want to create a formal manual, that's what I recommend. Formal manual, just do an internal memo and just print it off and give it to these people and have them sign it if they want to. If not, just make note in your internal memo.
It doesn't have to be complicated, folks. But I swear, between your small business clients and my small nonprofit clients, we got a lot of people flying without written down information.
That's right. Yeah, and it's a lot of entrepreneurs, either in the business world or nonprofit world, have this attitude, and I see it so often, and I don't blame them, is it's legal until I'm told it's not. Or if it sounds right, or if it's okay with me, then it's fine. But that's too risky. It could be too late. By the time you hear that what you've been doing for the last 5 years is not legal, you might lose your business or your organization.
Yeah. Or my other favorite is, well, we had a lawyer review this for us, about 5 years ago, and they said it was fine. And I'm like, okay. And they were a personal injury attorney. So they totally knew what they were talking about when it came to your,
Yeah.
Just because lawyer, quote unquote, looked at it doesn't mean they knew what they were doing, unfortunately.
And sometimes you dig deeper and maybe a lawyer didn't actually look at it. They talked about it
right at a cocktail party. Yeah.
And now what they think a lawyer saw, actually they didn't. And
and it's been 5 years, and actually we've changed the way we do things a bunch of times since then. Match. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it seems like, from these questions, there's some good takeaways here. So I've got 3, and let me know if you heard anything else. One is, as you're going through reopening, follow the guidelines, right? Look at what the city, the state, the feds are saying you should be doing, and try and follow those, because that is the standard that's being set right now. And then 2 was, be consistent. Don't apply your rules unevenly to certain people, like your friends or your favorite program participants or something, get special treatment. You've got to be consistent in how you apply your policies. And then I think 3 is, write it down. Actually have a policy, have it written, communicate it to your team. And that's going to take you a lot further than just trying to wing it and make stuff up as you go, because winging it leads to being inconsistent, right?
Yeah. Jeff, something I really like about these questions is that people actually care. I mean, in other settings, they wouldn't be asking this question. We're just opening. Screw it.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Amen to that. The nonprofit sector peeps are, everybody really is trying to do a good job, and they're just trying to do it with the resources they have. So that's why we're here, right? To give people more access to more resources.
Agreed.
Inti, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Stop. You can come back anytime. How can people connect with you online?
Yeah, CeibaFôrte.com, and the alternate website or domain is litigationinspanish.com. So I do tons of litigation, and most of my clients are Spanish speakers. So I bought litigationinspanish.com, and it works.
Ta-da! All right. Well, that's how you can find Inti online. He is a lot of fun to hang out with, let me tell you. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a huge favor. Share it with a friend. Rate, review, subscribe on your podcast app. It really helps me out. If you have a question or a story to share, I would love to hear from you. Send me a note online or leave me a voice memo by calling 612-208-9120. Thanks for listening. All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birkin. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkinlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birkin Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.